It is a very colourful shirt. I do like it. Oh, can you guys see that PDF all right? Yep. Yep. Cool. All right. Awesome. So, welcome to our webinar on predominantly the volunteer management framework. So, I guess the main reason for putting this document together was to, I guess, provide a resource to our clubs that, helping out with volunteer burden and some of the commitments and the challenges that are faced by our swimming clubs. So, putting this together also aligned with Swimming WA's strategic plan as well. We wanted to increase support for our clubs and recognition for volunteers, because I'm sure no matter what sport you're a part of, if you don't have volunteer support, it makes it very hard to run. So we wanted to make sure that we were providing a resource for clubs to help you guys out as well. Like Kirsty said, a lot of research went into putting this document together. So looking at the likes of AFL, athletics, basketball, netball, sailing, water polo. And basically we just went through and we picked out the best bits of the framework that we thought would most suit our swimming community. So I know, we'll go through it, and some bits you'll find easily relatable, some bits might be a bit challenging to think about, but it's all to do with putting a framework in place to help our volunteers. So we at Swimming WA are here to help and support our clubs with this sort of thing as well. So if you've got any questions throughout or even afterwards, you think of something at 10 o'clock tonight, send me an email, reach out, and if there's anything more that we can do to help, please let us know. A lot of this also came down to the community and listening to some of the feedback from our clubs, both metro and regional as well. So you'll find maybe there's a bit of a mix of photos throughout, so you might spot yourself. There's a few, I tried to get a wide range of all the photos that I guess are relative to what swimming entails. So we will move into the document. If anything changes with the document, let me know and I can always fix it as we go. So contents page and acknowledgement of country as well. But the main thing as part of the introduction is, what are the main reasons why people volunteer? These are things to always keep in the back of your mind, because this is what helps people to say, yes, I want to help out and do this. So things like giving back to the community, making you feel like you're making a difference, whether it's to a young person or an older person. Being a role model, that tends to be a really big thing for a lot of parents. Keeping the brain active, so incorporating learning new skills, gaining experience and knowledge in different areas. So you might be more suited, or your career might be very creative based or really clinical, whereas, volunteering at a swimming pool on a weekend is completely different and it allows you that outlet. Creating social bonds, that is a really big one for a lot of people, especially an older group of volunteers. Learning new skills, feeling like you're part of something, and then quite personally, increasing confidence and self-worth. And then obviously leading into what stops people volunteering. So if we're looking at what are the reasons why people are volunteering, we've also got to look at why they don't volunteer, and these can be quite broad. Burnout, tiredness tend to be the most prominent ones, especially with COVID happening and all of that sort of stuff. There was a lot of burden placed on volunteers, and that has affected quite a few people and their commitments. So we want to make sure that we can alleviate some of those burnout and tiredness aspects. Out-of-pocket expenses, giving up all their time / lack of flexibility. So, if someone's required to be at every single event and it's a 10-hour day every single day, they're giving up time with their friends and their family as well. So that can be a bit of an issue. Low confidence and shyness, feeling criticised, excluded, losing interest and not being recognised. They're quite huge aspects as well. The other two in the middle that I missed, assuming that swimming knowledge is required, because we obviously are part of a swimming community, it is assumed that swimming knowledge is required, but it isn't always. You don't need to know how to swim to cook sausages on a barbecue, for example. So it's a thinking outside the box a little bit. And if you're not, familiar with swimming, I wasn't a swimmer before I started in this role, but you're making sure that you're giving them opportunities to learn certain things that are required. If they don't, that most people don't need to know how to do a tumble turn to help out around the club. So that's the coach's role, that's the teacher's role. So there's a lot of things that general volunteers can do that don't require swimming knowledge. And I'm sure, like me, you pick it up as you go along as well. Having a disability is another one as well. Some people feel like they can't volunteer because they have a disability. We'll touch on it a little bit later, but having a disability is no barrier to volunteering because it's giving up your time, it's helping a sporting club, it's all the things that people without a disability will do. So it's incorporating that thought process that just because you have a disability, it doesn't mean that you can't help out. And we'll touch on that a little bit more as well. So this is the volunteer management framework. So there are 6 stages, which we will go through and talk about as we go. So preparation, recruitment, orientation, professional development, acknowledgement, and succession planning. So we'll go through all of those in the coming pages. But I guess the purpose of the volunteer management framework is, like I said, to give our clubs a resource that you can help support your volunteers with. It'll also aim to attract new volunteers and help out with existing volunteers at your club, simplifies procedures, policies and the responsibilities. So that's a big thing for our existing volunteers, is to make sure that they're not overloaded and that leads to burnout. Enriching the experience, so making sure that our volunteers are actually still enjoying what they're doing. Having fun is a really big part of it, so we want to make sure that we're still providing opportunities for our volunteers to be enjoying themselves. Allow the opportunity for success rather than failure. Sometimes if you're putting people up into positions that they have no idea or no training in, you're setting them up for failure, and we definitely don't want that with our volunteers because, like I said, they're giving up their time and their energy and their quality of life. So we want to make sure that we're giving them ample opportunity to succeed. And then acknowledging and celebrating the contribution of volunteers to our greater swimming community as well. So step 1, preparation. For most things in life, being prepared generally goes a long way. So I guess for this particular framework and looking deeper into the swimming community, it's important to be prepared and have a framework in place because roles and responsibilities are clearly defined. Everyone's held accountable, club goals are more likely to be achieved, and your efficiency, the time and resources isn't wasted, okay? Don't worry, I'm not going to read every single word on this document. You guys can flick through as you go. But like I said, if you've got any questions throughout, just let us know, raise your hand or type in the chat box. For the research that we went through, electing a volunteer coordinator is quite a big step that most clubs don't actually do. And there could be a number of reasons why that is the case. But if you're electing presidents and treasurers and secretaries and all of that sort of thing, have a think about electing a volunteer coordinator. This person is then responsible for overseeing all of your volunteers. And we'll go through the role in a second, but it's about protecting our resources, and our volunteers are our greatest resource in sport. So we want to make sure that there's a dedicated person that can look after those people. Also included in their role would be things like identifying new volunteers, assisting current club volunteers, and offering, additional development, which we as Swimming WA help with as well. Initially, there will be a small time commitment just to help set things up, but it shouldn't be something that takes on hours and hours of your time. So I guess the basis of a framework is once it's set up, you don't need to touch it. It's set up and it runs through. So networking, being warm and friendly tend to be really good skills of a volunteer coordinator. So you might already be sitting there thinking of someone in the back of your head. It's not something that should be forced forced on someone, but there's also things to consider, like what if people just up and leave the club, or what if someone gets really sick and they can't fulfill their role anymore? Having that person that oversees all of that is really important. If we scroll across, we're looking at the volunteer terms. So there's different terms of volunteering. It's important to make sure that if you're talking to someone about volunteering, that you have an idea of which sort of category it sits into. So for example, your ongoing placements are things like your president roles, your secretary roles, that sort of thing. Your set term placements tend to be like set terms, so things like a general committee member or a coach or a teacher. And your one-off placements are what most people tend to get involved in. So things like cooking sausages for a barbecue, emceeing, organising raffle tickets, timekeeping, that sort of thing. Another thing to consider is having descriptions of what positions are required. So Swimming WA have also put together a list of role descriptions, which will be up on the toolkit shortly as well. So always good to have a look, and they might be a little bit different to what your club requires, whether your club is smaller or bigger, but the general consensus is that will be the most amount of responsibility for that particular role. I don't know about you, but I like to know what I'm getting myself in for, whether it's work or volunteering. So if it's written down and it's a general clear role description, goes a long way in making sure that people know what they're in for and can't turn around and say, oh, you didn't tell me that. An annual review. So setting up an annual review, I'm sure most of you guys, if you're committee members or have been part of committees in the past, will generally set up some sort of review at the end of the season. Setting some time aside to do a volunteer review is also important. There's a list of dot points there that will, be part of that review. So making sure that any policy and legislation, any association changes are all noted and up to date. Renewal dates, so things like you're working with children's check or insurance. Identifying development opportunities. So, if you know that the, Swimming WA Club Conference is coming up and you want to send some volunteers, have a think about that. It also allows you to have a look at any goals that were set for your volunteers. So that might be recruitment based. And then, like I said, updating any requirements for documents. So you're working with children's check, your coach accreditations, all that sort of stuff. So majority of that would be covered in reviews anyway, but making it more volunteer based does help to identify any issues or challenges or concerns that you can address before the new season. Inclusion, so we'll touch on that a little bit later as well, but try not to turn people away because they might have a different cultural background or they're a bit older or younger. There's lots of different roles that swimming clubs need to be filled, and it might be, as simple as handing out certificates or being an MC or, talking to people. There's lots of different roles, and we'll touch on that again a little bit later. But please don't discriminate if someone offers their assistance, because there's plenty of things that they can do, and we want to make sure that we're not turning anyone away. Recruitment. So that's step 2, and it tends to be the one that we are asked the most about as Swimming WA. I guess probably the first paragraph there and all those dot points, they're the dot points of the reasons why people want to volunteer. And like I said earlier, we want to make sure that we're giving people opportunities to give back to the community, feel like they're making a difference, keep their brain active, give them opportunity to learn new skills and increase the confidence and all that sort of stuff. It can be hard to run organisations and sporting clubs, especially when, you've all got full-time jobs or kids or families or other commitments as well. But we're trying to make it a little bit easier for you. And this is the point of the document, like I said. If we have a look down at the photo of all the timekeepers, Jeff, that might look familiar to you. That was from our regional development weekend back in December last year. And without, our timekeepers and our volunteers, we can't run time trial events or anything official, because we need people to help out. And that's why it's so important to look after our volunteers, because if we don't have these people putting their hands up to help, we're going to be in a lot of strife and our kids are going to miss out. So attracting new volunteers. So it's always good to get new blood in, as they say. So some ideas, internal advertising through club emails or communications. New parents to swimming might not actually know all the background roles that volunteers need to do. So they might simply not be aware of people needing to set up gazebos or putting on a lunch or a dinner after training, whatever the case may be. They might just simply not know. External advertising, so you can advertise if you want to go like seek.com or school newsletters, flyers, that sort of thing. Social media posts work quite well if you're engaging wider communities, so your local community posts or your country town pages, things like that. Local schools, shopping centres, that's always a good place to put flyers and things like that up. Just, it might not need to be, hey, we're chasing volunteers, but it might be, do you want to give back to the community? Do you want to feel like you're making a difference? Those sorts of words tend to turn people a lot more than we are recruiting for volunteers. Information nights and workshops during training times, so that parents or people that drop their kids off and another parent picks them up, they have the opportunity to be involved whilst their kid is training. And the other thing to consider is club-based volunteer rosters. So like I said, packing up equipment, setting up gazebos, pulling them down, putting the pool blankets on, taking the lane ropes out, all that sort of stuff might be part of a roster that you get people to help out with. Some extra tips when encouraging new people, have the clear role descriptions like we mentioned and be really specific in what you're looking for. Allowing people a trial run if they're sitting on the fence and they're not really sure if A, they can do it, or B, they want to do it. If you're flexible and actually allowing them to have a go, chances are they're going to actually really enjoy themselves and want to come back and do it all again, rather than being forced into something they don't feel comfortable, they hate it, and they don't ever want to do it again. And don't forget to highlight their contributions and why it's so important. You know, your club, make sure you're valuing these people and their contributions, especially if they're new, because they're going to feel valued and they're going to feel like they're making a difference pretty much straight away. Existing volunteers, that tends to be a little bit of a tricky one, going back to why people stop volunteering. Burnout and tiredness is generally the most predominant one, like I said. So there's a few tips there to help alleviate those. So breaking some of the roles into role sharing positions, or at least coming up with a bit of a roster. It just helps to reduce that time commitment. So again, if someone's feeling like they're doing something every single day or every single weekend for 10 hours at a time, it does help to reduce that sort of feeling of, I can't do this. Communication is key. Make sure that you are talking to people and make sure that that is a two-way street as well. Make them feel like they're comfortable enough to talk to you as well if they're feeling like it's too much. Social media shout outs to your volunteers, especially those that have been around for extended periods of time. If someone's been volunteering at your club for 20 years, please don't forget about them, because 20 years is a long time for them to commit to volunteering at the club. And like I said earlier, make sure having fun is a really key aspect of volunteering. If people aren't having fun, we all know they're not going to continue doing it. So that's a really big point for us. The other thing that we get quite a lot from our clubs is, how on earth do I get the parents that are in the stands to help? I have been there and I have asked someone to help at a swimming club and I've received a flat out nope to my face. You're going to get those people, and I think no matter what you do, you're probably not going to change their mind, because they're probably not going to want to help in any aspect of their life. But talking to people in a nice, calm, positive manner, it goes a long way to get them to say yes. So for those that were at the club conference last year, Inclusion Solutions spoke about an activity called Head, Heart and Hands. So it's focusing on gentle conversations and what skills people have. So doing a bit of an audit in terms of who is at your club and who is coming into your club. Asking them what they're interested in or what their skills are, what their hobbies are, tends to get a better result than just asking people flat out if they can help. People have, you know, stresses and pressures and other commitments in their life, and if they feel like they're overloaded, they're probably going to say no. Whereas if you frame the question a little bit differently, you might get a different response. So, for example, someone might work in creative design or graphic design or something like that, and they might really like using Canva. You might be able to use that skill to put together some flyers for an upcoming carnival rather than putting them in, I don't know, an administrative position where they're, having to use accounting programs or whatever the case is. Find out what they're interested in, find out what they like to do, because them being on Canva for 20 minutes might create an amazing flyer where someone that doesn't know what they're doing in that particular program might take 2 hours and feel really crap about doing it. So have a think about the skills and have a think about who's at your club and tap into those different areas because they're there. We've just got to find out what they are. Moving on to the next part, I guess, of recruitment is screening your volunteers. So there are some legal requirements that you may be needing to follow up on. So things like you're working with children's check and a national police clearance. They are required for certain roles. So it's just making sure that if they are required, you're getting the appropriate documentation from your volunteers. And that comes down to when you're selecting them to ask for these pieces of documentation. You can refuse a volunteer if they won't provide these documents and it's needed. And I guess if they're not complying with what the club is asking for, perhaps ask yourself why. If they can't provide a working with children's check, for example, maybe it's not the best thing that they are volunteering at your club, because the last thing you want is to find yourselves or your children in a very sticky situation when it could be avoided by asking for that piece of documentation. Inventive ways to attract your volunteers. So I guess thinking outside the box a little bit is a really interesting time. You can find volunteers anywhere. It's just a matter of how you go about talking to them, I guess. Referring a friend promotion. Generally, kids have friends that have parents that are doing sports or hanging around, dropping kids off, all that sort of stuff. Do a promotion. See if you can get them to come and help timekeep for a night. Start small and build your way up. Most people are willing to say yes if they're asked. But think about it a little bit differently and see if you can do some sort of promotion or some sort of interesting way to get them involved. Virtual volunteers. So with a lot of our regional communities, geographical barriers might be a big part to someone not physically being able to help out and volunteer. But there might be other ways of doing, say, administration tasks online that they can still volunteer and help with without physically being at the club on a Wednesday afternoon, for example. Connecting with corporate volunteers. So corporate organisations tend to have some sort of social responsibility initiative that incorporates volunteering or some sort of community service. No harm in reaching out to these people and seeing if they are willing to come and timekeep what your carnival or organising a fundraiser, whatever the case is. Reach out, see what you get back. Advertising at local schools or universities. So particularly universities, some requisites for courses do have community service or volunteering hours on there. I know mine certainly did. So I had to do a certain amount of hours to go towards my credit point score. The other thing is the Duke for Sport. So the Duke of Ed award, actually one part of that is volunteer service. So we are hopeful that a lot of our kids can do that as part of their swimming, use volunteer service in their swimming. So again, there might be certain roles that they can help with that go towards that award. Orientation. So a bit like any new job or new role or responsibility, having some checklist or induction process does help to make them feel more comfortable. So making them feel really welcome and included and safe is a really big part of the orientation process. At the bottom there, those dot points, there's a bit of a checklist that you can put in place. So like I said earlier, when you're setting up the framework, it might be that you have to put 5 to 10 minutes aside to come up with a checklist that is relevant to your club. Once it's done though, it's done. You can just check it off with each new volunteer. So things like, is the volunteer aware of the strategic plan or the vision or the goals for the club? Makes it a bit tricky for the club to kind of ask someone to help if they're not aware of the behind the scenes and the reasons why the club is doing what it's doing for our swimmers. Have they been given a role description? Do they actually know what is required for that role? Have they been shown around the pool or the facility? Do they know where the toilets are, for example? Do they know the health and safety risks? Is there anything they should be aware of, even from a facility point of view? Have they been introduced to other volunteers at the club? So again, creating those social bonds, and things like uniform or PPE, if that's needed, please provide that, or at least give them an avenue to be able to find it themselves. Step 4 is professional development. So we're looking at ways to upskill, I guess, and provide experience and knowledge to our volunteers. So some roles you won't need to worry about PD, but for other roles, there's ways of making sure that we're training and upskilling our volunteers. So I guess, why is it important? It's to make sure that that minimum level of knowledge is up to date. So for a coach, for example, you need that minimum amount of knowledge to be able to then progress to the next stage. So it's making sure that that's ticking over each time. Help to grow and gain your current skill set, provide experience to improve performance. So I'm sure in every single one of us, there's that little part of us that wants to keep getting better and better. And this is why PD is important. Helps to challenge and develop our critical thinking skills. So thinking outside the box, thinking how we manage challenging situations, all that sort of stuff. It helps avoid feelings of staleness and complacency. So again, going back to some of the reasons why people stop volunteering, if we're giving people opportunity to grow and develop, that's going to help them increase their confidence and their feeling of value and self-worth. So we want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities. So where can you go for opportunities for training? So Swimming WA hosts a lot of development opportunities for our coach and teachers, our TOs, our swimmers, our parents. You've just got to look out for those opportunities, and they all go up on the calendar for our MSR database page and our website as well. So continually having a look at those. Things like our educational webinars. So we've got the how-to series, which is helping our clubs with different programs or resources or things that they need for governance purposes. But there's also, say, our Richmond Wellbeing webinar series that we've got running at the moment as well, which is focusing on different areas. So mental health, for example, or how to be a good sporting parent. So there's lots of different things that we're putting out there. A lot of it is based from the feedback that our clubs have given us. So if you've got any ideas or feedback from that, please let us know. We do look at it and we do think about it. DLGSC offer a lot of face-to-face and online resources for metro and regional clubs, so keep looking out for those. They tend to be on things like club governance, financial management, people management, goal setting, all sorts of things. If you're in the Wheatbelt region, I sent out an email today on behalf of DLGSC. They're doing some volunteer workshops across Dowran, Mora, Jurien Bay, Northam in the next coming weeks. So there's plenty of opportunities out there. And if you need help sourcing training opportunities, please let us know. Play by the Rules is another online portal that does a lot of training opportunities as well. So things like child protection, harassment, discrimination, all that sort of stuff. Time to time, you will need to provide evaluation and feedback. Obviously, it's pretty easy to give people positive feedback. It's not so great to give negative feedback. But keep in mind, you're giving people opportunities to improve their performance. You're not necessarily picking on them as a person. So there is the feedback sandwich, for example. That is a great way to deliver negative or constructive feedback without it feeling like an attack. So like a sandwich, your bread is the top and the bottom. It's a positive comment. It's a statement of things that they do really well. The inner part of the sandwich is where you can give them constructive feedback. So like I said, be cognizant of the fact that you're not attacking them as a person. you're helping them to improve their performance, for example. And there will be times where you need to have tough conversations with your volunteers because you can't let bad behaviour continue on. But you've just got to be aware of things like the tone and the choice of language and the volume of your voice, that you're being constructive, and that at the end of the day, you're helping them to improve their performance. Acknowledgement. So this tends to be a really big factor in the retention rates for volunteers. So a lot of volunteers across lots of different sports, not just swimming, they don't feel like they're being recognised. Swimming is quite good at putting things like our Volunteer of the Month award and our Volunteer of the Year awards up. There are cash prizes for the Volunteer of the Month awards, but we don't always get nominations. So it's hard to recognise from a state sporting organisation point of view when our clubs aren't letting us know of all of the amazing people. We know that there's amazing people in the community, and we want to make sure that we're recognising them. So there's lots of different examples there. So you can read through and see maybe what might work for your club the best. I guess the first one is probably the most important one, and that's just simply saying thank you at the end of a meeting or a club night or some sort of event. A lot of people get a really good feeling by just being thanked for what they've done. They're aware of the time that they're giving up, they're aware of what they're doing, but having someone come across and say, look, thank you so much, we really appreciate it, goes a long way, really does. So just going through a couple of those dot points, we've mentioned the social media and the website shout outs. Something a bit more personable. So sending a letter outlining maybe one or two really good things that they've done makes it feel a bit more personalised, and it makes them feel a little bit special and that they're personally getting recognised rather than just as a collective volunteer. Providing a name badge or an iron-on patch or lanyard if they're helping out, for example, an MC swimmer at an event. Providing a character reference if they're going for a job, for example. Life memberships, life appreciation certificates, all that sort of stuff. If there's a senior or maybe a supervisory role available and the volunteer might not know about it, thanking them for what they've done and say, hey, we want to recognise you. If you would like to step up, there is an opportunity for you and we're more than happy to support you in that. Again, asking people generally gets a lot of good positive feelings back. So that's really important. National Volunteer Week is coming up on the 15th to the 21st of May. So that's a thing that's done by Volunteering WA. So it's their kind of push to recognise volunteers across the state. There is, let me just pull it up. There's actually, hopefully you guys can see that website. There's actually a grant that's supported by Lottery West. And it's open at the moment, and it runs through. It's predominantly offering grants of up to $1,000 to be used by organisations to celebrate volunteering. So it obviously has to be an event between the 15th to the 21st of May to recognise your volunteers. But it's a good opportunity to if you can get, a little bit extra cash to surprise or maybe support your volunteers, I'm sure that I'll really love, a nice social dinner or a barbecue or whatever suits your club best. Every club is going to be a little bit different in that regard. But there's things like the grants that are specifically for volunteers that you can look into as well, and it just helps them to feel a little bit more valued, and it's something that's not coming out of your club's pocket as well. So we can pop the link to that in the group chat at the end as well. And like I said, looking at the Volunteer of the Month program and the Volunteer of the Year awards, we've had some excellent winners over our time of having the program in place. So we want to keep recognising, particularly not those that are always in the public eye that always get recognised, but those people that are doing really amazing things behind the scenes as well. And step 6 is succession planning. So we're looking at what's going to happen if someone leaves the club or gets sick or needs to step down for whatever reason. is there things in place to protect your club so that it doesn't fall over because you've got a volunteer that leaves? Something to think about as well is the barriers to succession planning. It's easy enough to get up and do it and make a plan, but there might be some reasons why it doesn't happen at your club. So things like having one person that holds all the information. If something happens to that one person and they stop volunteering or they stop being a part of the club, there's a whole lot of knowledge and experience that goes missing. So we want to try and stop that from happening as much as we can, sharing the knowledge, sharing the love in that regard. Thinking that volunteers won't ever move on or change clubs or, stop wanting to help, that's a huge barrier because it does happen and we have seen it quite a lot. So we want to make sure that we are helping you guys stop that from happening and that you're actually putting things and plans in place that if someone does leave, like I said, you've got someone there ready to pick up the pieces essentially. And then dreading change. No one likes change. Change management is a big thing in today's society, but we've got to make sure that we're prepared at the end of the day. Where to start with your succession planning? Go back to your preparation. Go back to step 1 and things like your annual review. Look at who might be leaving the club from, say, a retirement point of view. You might have, someone that's in their early 70s that goes, this is going to be my last year, guys. You want to make sure that you're having someone training and in that sort of mentorship position that they can learn on the go. They can learn all the ins and outs, and you've got someone there to help troubleshoot for any issues. Having someone there and then makes it a lot easier than someone walking into the role and going, oh God, I have no idea what to do, and there's no one that I can ask that's been in that position before. Other considerations when it comes to succession planning is your business and your strategic plan. So I know that you guys as part of committees will probably look at that on an annual basis anyway, but it's also, looking at it from the point of view of your junior volunteers, offering opportunities for them to learn from an earlier point of view, so that they're giving that time to develop and grow into that role. So Northam actually spoke about it in the club conference last year and all the succession planning that they put in place for their committee. So one thing that really worked well was having the junior roles. So junior treasurer, junior secretary, someone that's there to help out if the role becomes too much, but they're also learning at the same time. So they're actually able to develop those skills that are going to be required for those roles when that person above them moves on. Procedure manual, so having documents that have important information for systems and equipment use. So things like dolphin timing, meet manager, all those tricky programs that take a lot of training and learning. I'm learning Meet Manager, so I get it. It takes a bit of time, but having someone that's in the process of learning that as well. So you're not always relying on one person to know everything. You've got a couple of people there that can take over if they need to, and they have that base understanding or that base knowledge so that you're not left in the lurch at a time trial or a club night when someone can't make it or whatever the case is. And then things like reporting documents, so following up processes, financial reports, annual reports, that sort of thing for your club, making sure that there's processes or procedures in place so that the next person that comes along isn't left in the dark. And the last part of that is try and do a handover. If you've got a volunteer leaving for whatever reason, try and get them to do a handover, whether it is to the next person taking over the role or it's to someone else in the club that is taking on that role short term. It just allows for any knowledge or experience to be transferred in a nice, calm way, rather than someone that's coming in under complete pressure because everything's just happening all at once. It allows you to get some feedback as well on how to do certain things. So like I said, you've got the opportunity to ask questions and feel comfortable before you're left in the dark and it's too late. That is the framework, the volunteer management framework. So like I said at the beginning, Swimming WA are extremely thankful for all our volunteers in whatever capacity, because without them, it makes swimming a very, very difficult sport. And to be honest, it probably wouldn't run anywhere near as smooth. So we want to make sure that we're, giving our clubs resources in order to handle our volunteers and to make sure that they're staying around for as long as they can. One thing that we've created that isn't actually part of the framework is something that's called volunteer bingo. So it was something that I helped create with our team as well. You guys all know how to play bingo. I'm sure you've won money or alcohol or vouchers or whatever in the past, but it's all swimming related. So it's looking at ways to get people involved, ways to showcase different skills that you learn as well. And it helps to get people involved in other areas of swimming. So, for example, open water. We still need a lot of volunteers for our open water events. But there's things like travelling to regional clubs, helping out at, any sort of event, Swimming WA events. Have you been to HBF Stadium? All that sort of stuff. So this is a really good tool for clubs to use to help acknowledge their volunteers. So whether or not you put maybe a bottle of wine on the first person to get 5 or whatever the case is, make it relevant to the volunteers and the members at your club. But at least it's something different. It's something fun you can try with your club volunteers. Helps to bring people together as well. So like I said, creating those social bonds. I think that's all I've got. Hopefully you're still all awake. Did anyone have any questions on anything that was spoken about or any feedback or anything? Hopefully I haven't bored you all.
No, thank you so much. Right now, questions don't really come to mind. I feel like I had a lot of information. I might have questions later on, but thank you so much.
Oh no, it was great to hear. It's
yep, likewise. Yeah, thank you very much for putting it on.
No worries. And like I said earlier, if you guys have questions or things you think about at 10 o'clock at night or whatever, let us know. My email is development@wa.swimming.org.au. So if you get stuck or anything like that, anytime, we're here to help, and Kirsty is as well. But we'll make sure that you guys get sent that framework and the bingo idea. It's just different ways to help out your club and making sure that we're providing those resources for you as well. But it's just ideas, and a lot of it comes back from feedback from our clubs that we're working with as well. So a lot of this stuff comes from, going out to the clubs and going to the regional weekends and going to our metro competitions and things like that. We're there in a work capacity, but we're also looking out for certain things that help all clubs as well. So I guess that's an important thing to note as well for you guys. Yep.
I guess on that note, I have thrown into the chat the volunteer management program and the Volunteering WA grant link.
Yep.
This recording and all of the documents that Jess has talked about will be on the Swimming WA website under resources and webinars as well by the morning. And I will add on the bingo as a separate one as well for you to download for those who are interested. Otherwise, thank you all very much. Thank you very much, Jess. I think you did a wonderful job of presenting this. I know a lot of hard work has gone into developing this. You should be incredibly proud. And for those on here, I do think that they will be operating within their clubs in a lot better capacity.
Thanks, guys, and thank you for giving up your time.
Sorry, I've just got one question.
Yeah, Jeff.
Hi, I have been listening on the sideline.
Hi. How are you?
Yeah, good, thank you. My name's Kelly. Hi, I'm his better half. My question is about rewarding and I guess gifting for volunteers. Is that allowed? Can club use their money to do that, or is that a no or a conflict or what have you there?
I guess, if you're starting to pay people for certain roles, they're not still volunteers, then obviously that brings up a lot of different issues. But things like honorariums, Kirsty, correct me if I'm wrong. They do, well, they can be awarded, say, at the end of a season, but it's not necessarily a payment as such, if that
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yep.
But I guess, you know, in terms of things that are a bit more personable, that tends to be a little bit more better received, I guess. So things like your letters or your life memberships or things like that. We obviously give away the prize for the Volunteer of the Month awards as well. So there is a little bit in that. But I guess it becomes a bit tricky in terms of whether you're paying someone to do a role or whether you're doing something like an honorarium where you're just recognising their contributions, but it's not the
Yep.
same as getting paid. Does that make sense?
Yep,
It
I
depends
like
on
that.
what the position is as well. Sorry. So if it's a club committee member, it's generally not acceptable to pay someone to sit as president, for instance. However, the president may wear dual hats and may also be coaching on the sideline. So maybe their honorarium, which is not actually a payment, is that they get a 20% reduction on their training fees, for instance. So it doesn't have to be a cash transaction, and realistically, long as you can show within minutes and it's documented that the committee as a whole agree, then you generally have no issues. And if it is for a president or someone on the committee, that they're removed from the vote, and yeah.
Lovely. Thank you.
Did you jumped on, Cal? I just realised how bad that light was above my head, so hopefully you it didn't blind you all. Problem with being the last one in the building, but all good. Easy. Is anyone have anything else to add? Any questions or feedback or anything? No. Awesome. Well,
Brilliant.
thanks again for jumping on, guys. We really do appreciate it, and hopefully we can see some of the good things that you guys are doing for your volunteers. So good, thank you.